After waking up from the bed, the reborn soul saw the withered female corpse beside it. Upon realizing that the wounds on its body were no longer a concern, it, having acquired Emily's appearance and memories, immediately dealt with the corpse. However, since Emily had not returned home for 3 days, her partner was about to report her return to the police. The soul, disguised as Emily, had no choice but to resort to murder. After packing the body and cleaning up the crime scene, just as he was about to rest, he discovered that his new body had started to decay. Compared to the previous body's usage duration, the mere 6 hours he now had were not enough for him to adequately prepare for the next consumption. At this moment, a detective suddenly appeared, and upon learning that the male owner was not home, the detective decided to stay and wait. But he quickly became the new prey of the soul, and when the woman beside him touched him, he found himself unable to move, with his life force rapidly draining away. After acquiring a new body and memories, the man disguised as a detective found gasoline in the room and set the house on fire before the delivery arrived. Amid the terrified shouts of the delivery person, he calmly started the detective's car. Then he began searching for antibiotics or cocaine that could help him delay the decay. After cornering a drug dealer in an alley, he searched the dealer's pockets for drugs and took large inhales of them in the car. With this, he could maintain his body for a little longer. He followed his previous memories to a familiar tavern and saw the woman he had been longing for, Julia. Initially, Julia didn't pay much attention to the stranger who approached her, but his humorous conversation and gentlemanly demeanor left a strong impression on her. Consequently, under his flirtation, Julia, unable to resist the temptation, got entangled with him in the alley behind the bar. However, as the corruption accelerated, the man let out a painful groan, and he had no choice but to quickly send Julia away and head to the streets in search of a new body and soul. Soon he encountered a dentist on the street who was harassing a female colleague. After absorbing the man's life, she once again entered the man's home with a new identity. The next day, with the help of antibiotics, she completed her work and maintained her disguise as someone else, which always left her feeling exhausted. So she used the new body to enjoy delicious food and watched a movie that brought her physical and mental pleasure. As night fell, the man once again walked into that familiar tavern and soon awaited his lover. Julia, using her identity as a dentist, started chatting with Julia, who also mentioned her own situation. It turned out that Julia and her husband Richard had a son, but unfortunately, the child passed away from illness at the age of 3, which caused a rift between the couple. However, one night, Richard unexpectedly prepared a romantic surprise for his wife. This made Julia feel the happiness of being loved once again, and she immediately let herself go with her husband. But when she woke up in the middle of the night, Richard was nowhere to be found. Since then, Julia has been living on her own. After hearing the story, the man offered Julia a drink, and then she immediately drove to the motel. As her body was entering the incubation period again, she had no choice but to call the nurse who was harassed by the dentist. Although the nurse could not tolerate her boss's constant harassment, she still drove over at the dentist's pleading, hoping for a promotion and raise. When the girl approached the man in the dark, she had no chance to regret. After the absorption was complete, the soul, now possessing the nurse's appearance, took the withered corpse to the suburbs to incinerate it. However, during the process, she was noticed by nearby residents. In a panic, she drove away, but she knew well that she might have exposed her identity. So using the nurse's identity, she took a large amount of antibiotics from the dentist's clinic. After using the antibiotics to extend the body's usability, she drove once again to the bar where Julia appeared every night. Her glamorous appearance quickly piqued Julia's curiosity, and the two soon started chatting, as if Julia had noticed the sadness in her eyes. As a consultant, Julia kindly offered her business card and hoped that this beautiful girl would contact her if needed. However, their conversation was quickly interrupted by a lecherous man, and the perceptive Julia promptly walked away. Little did she know, the girl's gaze never left her. Since the nurse's appearance had been made public after being discovered while destroying evidence, the soul decided to play it safe by inviting the lecherous man back home. However, the man's impulsive behavior was unbearable for the soul. After failing to reject the man's advances, he became murderous and simply chose to act. He easily killed the man and quickly returned home to pack his belongings. but the police arrived soon after, and his suspicious behavior did not escape their notice. So, in order to shake off the police tailing him, he had no choice but to hide in an open garage along the way. After spending a night in the garage, he woke up the next day to find that he had been found by the nurse's boyfriend. In a panic to get rid of the man, she knocked him to the ground with a stick. Then he lay in the bed of a pickup truck on the street, successfully avoiding the man's harassment. But as the pain in his body intensified, he realized he couldn't keep hiding like this, so he decided to tell Julia the whole truth. Following the address on the business card, he found Julia's studio. To his surprise, Julia was on a date with an artist named Robert. At this point, the soul's body had already begun to decay, and in order to complete the absorption before life ran out, he had no choice but to follow them. After Robert returned home, he knocked on the man's door under the pretense of delivering a package. After completing the absorption, he called Julia using Robert's identity. After a heartfelt confession to Julia, he quickly received her approval and went to the home of the woman he loved. Under the intimate lighting and music, Julia accepted his advances, and the two of them let themselves go. During the date with Julia, his lost soul finally found solace. But upon returning home, he smelled the stench of a corpse, prompting him to hastily deal with the body that had already begun to decompose. He discarded it in the wild, but what he didn't expect was that due to the exposure of his previous whereabouts, the police had already launched an investigation into this murderer hidden among the crowd. Through the photos released by the police, Julia recognized a few faces she had briefly encountered. Seeing this, the man immediately turned off the TV, and Julia, with his evasive explanations, temporarily believed that these matters had nothing to do with her. As time went on, antibiotics could no longer prevent the decay of the flesh. Realizing he needed to undergo transformation again, he couldn't help but reveal the truth to Julia. It turned out that this old soul named Andrew had consumed his own mother when he was 12 years old. Since 1954, in order to survive, he had killed one victim after another. After unintentionally consuming Julia's husband, Richard, he deeply felt Richard's love for Julia. So, he embraced Richard's identity and let himself go with Julia, and he could never forget this woman whom he wanted to protect. But Andrew's confession, and the fact that he had killed countless people, left Julia, who wanted to leave, in a panic. Despite Andrew's repeated attempts to stop her, Julia took out her portable taser and fiercely knocked the man to the ground. However, as his life was threatened, Andrew involuntarily entered a consumption state, and amidst the man's regretful tears, the convulsing Julia lost her life. Julia's death made Andrew completely lose his desire for life. Therefore, when the body began to decay, he curled up on the bed, enduring the excruciating pain, despairingly waiting for death to arrive. What he didn't expect was that after the decay ended, he was somehow reborn from a mass of flesh and returned to his original self. By this time, he was already over 70 years old, and apart from a stray dog that could still recognize him, no one knew what this white-haired old man had gone through. Andrew also realized that if he had refused to struggle from the beginning, perhaps there wouldn't have been so many victims. But by this time, he was beyond redemption, and the guilt would forever linger in his heart, until the day he truly perished. Alright, that's the end of today's explanation. If you like my video, please don't forget to like and comment. See you tomorrow.